Hello, and welcome to The Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name is Steven Eiderstein, and thank you for joining me as I do the chapter review for Chapter 14 from the book I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. It's been a journey so far for this book. This is the book we read it out of. This is one of the original printings, and I really enjoy reading out of the originals, like I said last time. But you can also get this copy of it. You can buy this on Amazon if you'd like, whatever you'd like to do. This way you can mark it up and not feel bad about marking up something potentially 100 years old. So that's what I do anyway. Get the reprints as well. So go ahead, give us a like on our YouTube channel. Give us a subscribe. We are also on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So please don't hesitate to look us up and follow along on all our channels. We also have an Instagram coming up too. We're getting that kind of put together right now as you speak. So, but I am looking forward to doing this review and kind of getting into this chapter. This chapter is very relevant to me in my life in a lot of ways because it talks about how to help people and how that has an impact and how our own personal spiritual journey actually has an impact on the quality of help we give, which I do believe is true. So let's go ahead and we'll get into it. This chapter is called Remaking the World. This is, again, chapter 14 from I Was a Pagan by V.C. Kitchen. And yeah, the chapter is named This Business of Remaking the World Sociology. And I just wanted to bring this in here. So this title, Remaking the World, is by a Frank Buchman. This was actually written 1947. So this was written after this book came out. But this was made, that book, it's actually compilations of his speeches. And he was a founding member of the Oxford group, actually. So it's interesting. It's I thought it was an homage to that book. Then I realized that book is older, or is not as old as this book. So he had named this chapter before this book came out. So I wonder what the common thread was between the two, that both used it as a name in their literature. So I thought that was interesting myself. But anyway, so Remaking the World is a book as well from another member of the Oxford group. So that's all really cool stuff. But so I just wanted to throw that in there. And as that was the title of this chapter. So, but let's get to the opening of this. You know, I loved the opening of this chapter. Actually, it was, I liked it because it started out with something he introduced in the first chapter. That, if you remember, a theme has been the 5 P's: possessions, pleasure, power, position, and applause. And how those things were the material, superficial things he used to pursue until he started to realize those were empty and those held no real value to him in his life. And so we're at the point in the book now where we're going to start really talking about that service principle, that giving back, helping other people, and the best way to actually do that and how to be of service. So I like that he opened up with this because it's it reflects back to the beginning of this journey where it's an entirely new way to live. It's an entirely new way to think about life. So I'm going to read this opening paragraph, actually. I had gained most of my possessions, pleasure, power, position, and applause I wanted in life, but they did not bring me what I had hoped to find. I had, you might say, attained my materials aims, but found no lasting gains. And as most people do when they miss the point in life, I was quick to blame this on the other fellow. Now, I relate so much to this. Now, I can't say I was ever as well off as this gentleman was in his life, but I can say that no matter how much I accumulated of any of those things, It was never enough. I always had a sense of lack. I always had a sense of needing more, and constantly in pursuit, onto the next thing, onto the next thing, onto the next thing, which really doesn't work well for anybody at the end of the day. And it leads to an unsatisfied, unfulfilled life. And I was very quick to blame. I was quick to blame the world, whether it was society, whether it was my family, whether it was my upbringing, whether it was my friend group, my job, my anything, my boss. I just wanted to find somebody to pin it on so I didn't have to take responsibility for it. And that me blaming someone else let me feel like I was doing the best I could. It was other people that were holding me back because I didn't want to face the truth that it was myself that was really the problem here. Right? It was really me that was causing the issues in my life. And from an outside perspective, everyone would have told me that. And people probably did try telling me that. But the reality is I couldn't actually be honest enough to see that. I couldn't actually entertain that idea. So blaming people was a number one go-to for me. And then self-pity. Self-pity was my next favorite thing. And it's funny because he goes on to say, and he thought everyone should, as I personally did, that everyone should be at this certain level, right? Everyone should have their needs met and everything. But then he talks about how even if that goal was achieved, he still wanted to be better than other people, though. Like, he wanted everyone to have this contentment with life, but he just wanted to be a little bit higher up than the rest still. He still wanted to have like prestige over people, almost like he wanted to still be that important guy and defeat his ego, that sense of self-importance and that overinflated sense of self, and what he found out, and he goes on to talk about this, is the more he actually learned about spirituality, the more he learned about the way things go and how we're supposed to live and a different way of living, he realized the failure in the current cycle of things, right? Because it's really easy to point at, especially today, right? Especially in the United States, but all over the world. There's a lot going on all over the world right now. To point fingers and blame, saying, hey, it's the administration's fault that things aren't working out, whether it's the last one or this one or the one 2 ago or the one 4 ago or a certain individual in the administration in this one or the last one, right? Like, everyone's got a finger to point at somebody to say, this is the reason why things aren't working, right? Finger pointing like that. And what you come to realize that there will always be that. And Kitchen realized this too. He saw that you can change the administration as many times as you want. You can upheave the entire government as many times as you want. But the reality of it is something else is what actually has to change, right? So I'm going to read a quote that it's pretty early on in the book, or in this chapter. It's right on page 203, actually, if you're following along here. And it's right here. Middle of the page. The idealistic end offered nothing but heartbreak. This is talking about institutionally, government, things like that. The other would lead nowhere but to social revolution, which, as always, would be nothing but the exchange of a known evil for an unknown evil, a change in the delegation of power, with no change in the powers of the delegate. A change in the basic system with no change in the baseness of men. I saw, in other words, that it was not a new system we needed, but a new people. Not a new division of wealth, but a new discernment of where wealth lies. Not a new kind of government, but a new quality of life. Now that is a heck of a quote, in my opinion. I absolutely love that quote because it's true. And it's true as per my own personal experience, right? I've seen it happen on a micro level in my own life. Like, when I got better, when I changed me, the things that were bigger than me that I were involved with got better, right? They got healthier. I was able to bring in different perspective. I was able to behave differently and engage with it differently. And when that was able to happen, things changed, right? But I changed. I didn't demand something else change to compensate for me in a blaming sort of way, right? It's not the institution's fault necessarily. Like, we, the people, we, the individuals that make up this larger thing called society, which elects this government, is what needs to change. We need to have this personal growth first, right? And this just resonates so much today. On the next page, he talked about, I saw no division of spoils. I saw that no division of spoils can really help people who are spoiled themselves. I saw that to rebuild the social order, its constituents would have to be rebuilt one by one. That's exactly what needs to happen in all areas. It's kind of amazing to actually see this was written in 1934, and we're having the same exact issue today. Entitlements, like, out of this world in our society today. We've become so extremely comfortable in our lives. The fringes have become acceptable. And however, whatever perspective that you take on that, right? Whichever side you're on, they both believe the same, especially in the United States. And this just resonates so deeply today, because since 1934, how many times has the government shifted hands, switched sides, revamped, had corruption, had these things rooted out, new deals, new this, new that? The government has been we've been trying to manipulate the government to reform to what we think it should be to help us the most, so we can take from this government, right? But the reality of it is the foundational structure of our society needs a remake. We, on an individual and singular, one by one basis, need to recompile ourselves, and we need to realign ourselves with virtue and moral and principle. And I know that can vary from person to person what that looks like. I know that very well. But that realignment, that redefinement really needs to happen if we are to make changes on a grander scale. And he talks about this in that on page 204, just like with everything else, with his marriage, with his money, with his job, with his personal politics, with everything, to be of service to this society, he actually has to change himself first, right? And he has to do more himself. So the first thing he has to do is he has to actually start helping other people more, right? He actually has to start practicing service, right? And a lot of people think that about charity when we come to this, which is kind of what we're talking about, right? And that's what he refers to, as he starts talking about charity and what that looks like for him, and how he's always practiced charity, and how he's always been involved with charity and what that looked like for him, which is great. I'm glad that he did that, because what he talked about was just feeding mouths. Fixing an immediate need. They're hungry, feed them, right? But what he didn't follow through on was trying to fix the underlying cause that put them in the position where they became hungry in the first place. And I'm not talking about fixing that they're human. No, I'm talking about why are they in the position that they're in, right? To actually follow through a little bit more and do more than just continue to fix a problem for them, right? It's not just fixing problems. It's showing them how to fix themselves is what he gets at, right? This isn't so simple as to just, if you feed enough people, eventually the world's going to get better. No, there's some underlying things. There's some stuff we actually have to take a look at personally as to why a person is actually disconnected from being able to have themselves in a good way. And this is where a lot of finger pointing comes in. This is where a lot of lack of responsibility happens. And I know there's a lot of people coming from a lot of different situations, but there's still a certain level of personal accountability that has to be taken on for somebody to actually grow and change, right? And the way he phrases it and presents it in this is he says that the best way to help somebody is actually is helping them figure out what is blocking them from connecting to God. Right. And that obviously, when I say God, we're talking about the God of your understanding, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's a Christian God, whether it is just energy, whether it's Mother Nature, whatever it is. Right. But actually connecting to that power greater than yourself and being able to leverage that. Right. To find that connection to this world again and heal that. Because when that becomes healed, from what VC Kitchen's saying, and my own personal experience and what I've observed, when that becomes healed, people get better. People's lives change, right? So he's not just talking about helping people in an immediate moment. Yeah, that has to happen, right? A starving belly will distract a lot of people from actually getting well. And I understand that. So that does need to happen, but there has to be some follow through on that, right? Like to be of genuine service to people and to actually want to help people, you have to move past just the immediate need stage and say, what is it that I can provide you? And what is it that I can help you with? That's the thing that's getting in the way between you and your creator to actually help you stand up on your own again, right? And he has this great quote: if I give charity without God, he is likely to find neither next time. And I thought that was a fantastic, fantastic quote. If I give charity without God, he's likely to find neither next time, right? Because the help isn't always available when the help is needed. So when someone finds the help that they need for their immediate situation, if those next steps aren't taken, the spiritual steps, those healing steps aren't taken, right? An opportunity very well may be lost forever. So making or putting yourself in a position to be the most of service to somebody does not come from just merely money or resources. It comes from the sharing of your experience. It comes from the willingness to help someone connect back to that power greater than themselves, whatever that might be. And that's true charity. That's true service, right? And that's true. That's being truly helpful. And how that should be a responsibility felt by people that have benefited from that spiritual healing that's happened, is to actually help facilitate somebody's reconnection to that. And a big field in this, the helping field even today, is the social work field. And I think this is, it's amazing that he brings up this even 90 years ago. This is 1934, right? So probably written before that. So 95 years ago. He brings up the social work field and why it's not effective, right? And how the social work field is just fixing obvious problems. So I'm going to read a quote. It's on 205 to 206 here. All right. Here it is. Last paragraph for those. last paragraph on 205. Yeah, it goes over onto 206, right? The Oxford group, in short, taught me that true Christian charity is not a matter of sympathetic sentimentality in trying to meet a man's obvious need alone. They taught me that it is a matter of getting down to his deeper, hidden needs, no matter how much more difficult that might be. It is easy, for example, to get a man to show you his cellar and thus diagnose his need for a ton of coal. It is far more difficult to get him to show you his soul, diagnosing his sin and relating his need to its remedy in Christ. This, however, is the only effective way to help. So that's a pretty powerful thing to be saying. That's a pretty substantial thing to be saying, honestly, is to relate every single issue a person has in their life to a lack of connection with God, right? And if you had told me this 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would have called you crazy for actually stating that. I would have said that you're fanatical, you're delusional. I would have said that, no, I just need these things. And, I when I was in a mindset that money would fix things, you couldn't have told me that was true, that a connection with a power greater than myself was what was going to restore me to sanity. What was going to actually help me rebuild the life I needed to rebuild, to heal the wounds that I had, to help me re-engage and reorient to this world that I had such a problem with. But now I read something like that, and it has a profound effect on me. It resonates deeply for me now because I know it to be true. It's been true from my experience. All these things that I would have told you had nothing to do with God had everything to do with God. And that's the amazing part, is I didn't even know. I didn't even know that's what was going on, right? And it gets into why it's important for people to have had this spiritual experience themselves when they're actually going on to help. Gets into that here in just a minute. We'll talk about it, but because he goes into next, he goes into how social work is beginning to evolve, and they use this case method, right? And where they just take an entire individual, look at him in a holistic and entire way, and say, hey, what can we help with, right? And this social work style was developed. They were doing this in the 1930s, right? We think we're so new and new age, and we're trying all of these fresh new ideas, so advanced ideas, creative ways to engage with people, right? And they were doing it 95 years ago. The case method, which is pretty much just person-centered care today. It's pretty much just look at a person in their entirety, right? Because that's going to be a more telling way to figure out why they do what they do, which today we know is obvious. And then he's in the social work case method, as he called it, of that day. They would just address all of those issues, right? How did he? Let me look at that. I'm just going to read this. By the case method, for example, a social worker studies an individual's personal problems and diagnoses the cause of trouble. He may even try to make up any educational deficiencies he finds there. So get him education. He may try to help the individual surmount any marital difficulties, marriage counseling, personal boundaries, things like that. Or show them how to train his children, parenting classes. All the rage today. He may show him how to budget his income, financial counseling. That's a thing as well. He may teach him how to overcome his physical disabilities, right? That's an entire field in and of itself. He works with individuals, in other words, as Jesus Christ himself would work, as any Christian worker should work, right? Like you address the entire person. It's not necessarily cookie cutter stuff. You see the individual for who they are. That's really important. So it's not that this case method is invalid, but he says this, but with the following important difference. It is not enough to just show a man what changes in his life are needed. The need is never met till you give him the power to change, along with the discernment. Now that is what the difference is. There's a lot of people you can lead to the well. There's a lot of people you can lead to or give knowledge to. But many don't have the strength to apply it. Many don't have the willingness to apply it. Many don't know where to even start to actually change, right? So those in 12-step programs will find this familiar because in I think it's the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that the whole goal of the program is to help you find a power, connect to a power that can help you with a change, right? It's much different wording, but in summation, right? If you're drinking a lot, someone tells you not to drink. Okay, obvious solution, but they can't do it without the power to change it, right? They don't have the power internally to do it. So when they reach out, when they go through the steps, they found a connection to a God of their understanding again, and they get that power. Well, that's that power he's talking about that the Oxford group gave him. He's talking about that's the power that needs to be passed on to those being helped in those social work cases, the case management method that he's talking about here, that we still do today, right? All of our skill sets have developed in the helper field, right? In the civil service field, right? They've become much well-versed in therapies and psychology and all of these other practices, right? But if you're not actually helping someone connect to the power greater than themselves, the God of their understanding, they're not going to be able to institute the change, at least not consistently, right? It will always just be a temporary change, waiting for enough frustration to build. They won't do it anymore. So a social worker can only truly help, he says. Okay. The only power that fully meets a man's physical, mental, and spiritual needs is the power of God. And that power can only be conveyed through a converted social worker. Converted social worker, somebody that's had a spiritual experience and then can pass along that information, then can actually share some experience or some hope about how to actually establish a connection with the God of your understanding to gain the power needed to make the effective changes they need to actually reorient their life. That's the piece that's missing even today, actually, especially today, right? God and religion is, and even largely spirituality is removed from that. People like to add it in now. Oh, what's your spiritual practice? Are you meditating? Which is great. Meditation's fantastic. But do you believe there's a power out there that you can reach out to and have contact with that'll give you the strength to change? That's not talked about. When we tell people, hey, you should be doing things different, this is a way to do it, and they're all excited about it, and they want to do it, and they want to take the changes, right? And they fail repeatedly because they have no belief in themselves that they can actually change. No understanding of how to do it, no strength of will to do something different because of their disconnection from a power greater than themselves. we set them up for failure as a society, I think. All those who try to be genuinely of service are really not helping and even potentially harming those they are trying to help, right? And he actually even talks about how those social workers that are helping people and they don't have God in their life, they actually get met with a lot more resistance, right? Because if it's not oriented around a spiritual understanding or a spiritual perspective and connecting them to a God of their understanding, a social worker or a helping individual of any nature that doesn't orient it around that is simply imposing a set of morals and structures that they have deemed appropriate and necessary for the individual. So it's one person telling another person what to do. So it's someone else's decision on morality imposing on another person. And guess what's going to happen? He talks about it, actually. You get met with such resistance to this. You get people just close up. People don't want to actually invite you in to the conversation anymore because it feels like judgment. It feels like a chastisement, even, right? Because they feel like it's just you in a power of or a place of power and superiority over them. Excuse me, trying to tell them how to live their life. So without God and that power greater than yourself and the morality coming from that and the ideals coming from that, that's where the discernment is. That's where the actual guidance is. It doesn't come from another human. Those things come from a God of your understanding. Those things come from a connection to that power greater than yourself. And then someone might help you with a guide to walk towards that ideal. But it's not one that they chose for you. It's when the person has freely chose themselves. And also, somebody that has not had a spiritual awakening cannot see truly what the problem is. If you have never had that spiritual connection, that spiritual fulfillment, right, that allows you to actually know what happens when you're disconnected from a God of your understanding, when you're actually cut off from that power greater than yourself. If you haven't had that experience yourself, you don't know what to look for when you're helping somebody else and trying to make a true and genuine impact on their lives to give them the opportunity for growth. You don't know what to even look for if you've never had this yourself. So a converted social worker, he says, is the most effective because it has everything that they need to actually meet their immediate needs, identify the true underlying problem, and give them hope and guidance to actually connect to a God of their understanding so they can effect permanent change. That's the exciting part of this. That's where the true help comes from. And that's where we can give ourselves the opportunity to change people's lives. There's nothing better than that, right? To be able to be a vessel for the God of your understanding to work through and to help someone else have a spiritual experience, right? To see somebody else become fully alive after living a life that they thought was impossible. And they came to you asking for food. They came to you asking for a ride. They came for you to help with their drinking or their drugging. They came to you to help with their marriage. Those are all symptoms. All symptoms. We get to get down to brass tacks and actually see something different. We get to give them true hope. That's one of the most healing things. So, he talks about how, let me just open this up real quick. It says only the direct, he's Christian, very religious in, I think Protestant, or I'm not sure his actual denomination, but so Jesus Christ is his ideal to strive for, which is many. But he states here that only the directing love of Jesus Christ can give any worker the right to enter the life of another human being. In fact, only such love can gain us entrance. And we talk about that a lot today. We talk about how love is the key to everything. Like agape love for your brother, brotherly love, whatever you want to call it. Goes by a lot of names. But that's truly where this has to originate. That love you feel, that connection, that energy you feel from being connected to the God of your understanding and from knowing a true living God and that presence in your life, whatever that might be, right? We have to help from that place. Not for selfish motive either. Not because it makes me look good and does not because it makes me feel good, but because to be of genuine service to our fellow man is what the God of our understanding would want us to do. That's what the world wants us to do. Nature, source, energy, the universe, whatever you consider and whatever you think. That's where it comes from. And he talks about, I love that he named this too, right? On page 210, if you're following along. With nothing but social gospel or social sciences, however, he cannot go beyond physical education, medical care, and cleaning up of insanitary conditions. The provision of recreation centers and the issuing of health and liability insurance. Like, those are all great things, he's saying, but you can't go past that. For those who haven't actually had that spiritual realignment, he does not, through these agencies, effectively root out self-indulgence and fear. The two factors which probably contribute more to ill health than any others you could name. Self-indulgence and fear. Whew. Talk about hitting the nail on the head, especially for today's society, right? Self-indulgence and fear. That's what so many people have a problem with today. And people overindulge in fear, right? Like self-indulgence. And this can be from laziness. This can be from video games. This can be drugs. This could be alcohol. This could be sex, porn. This could be food. I mean, that's the obvious one, right? Self-indulgence. We are gluttons for anything that makes us feel good today. Anything that gives us a shot of dopamine, we're on board for. This could be social media, right? TikTok, scrolling, doom scrolling, all of that stuff. That's all relevant to this. And fear we're not good enough, fear we're never going to accomplish anything, fear that we're going to get sick, fear, right? We're the most mentally ill nation, I think, right now is the United States. So many people are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, right? It's almost all fear-based and regret-based. So he talks about we're able to fix all these superficial things, all these on top of the surface things to look at and say, that's a problem, let's fix it, right? But if you haven't had that spiritual understanding, you will not be able to call out fear and self-indulgence in someone's life, right? Self-centeredness is what they talk about in the 12-step recovery world, right? Self-centered, selfish, self-indulgent, self-absorbed. You won't be able to actually see that stuff. You won't be able to see how it's manifesting and be able to point it out, right? So the stuff he's talking about here is just, we haven't gotten much better at it. I'll say that much. We are still working on it. And I wish we could have made progress in a positive direction rather than it seemingly becoming more fearful and more self-indulgent, right? And he goes on to say, like, a physician can actually help talk to somebody about their laziness and need for exercise, and to cut back on their drinking, and to all of these things, right? Like a physician can have those things, but Kitchen says when a doctor makes those suggestions and someone takes them, it's merely just suppression, right? Because you have a bad behavior, change it. You still want to do the bad behavior, right? Like if you drink too much, you cut back. You're not actually enjoying it anymore. You're not drinking as much as you want to drink, right? You're not binge watching Netflix every night. You enjoy doing that. That's a hard thing to change, right? So it's suppressing the desire. And Kitchen talks about how if you just suppress the desire, it's going to come out sideways, right? It's going to come out in some other area of your life, right? People put down alcohol and they pick up sugar. They gain 70, 80, 90, 100, 200 pounds when they get sober because they've replaced it with something else. It happens with everything. They pick up sex, pornography. There's a lot of vices that can get slotted on in there because they're just merely suppressing the desire and it's getting rerouted somewhere else. And he says, only God can actually remove the desire to overindulge, the desire to be selfish, right? Those self-centered thoughts, those selfish actions. Only connecting with a God of your understanding and a power greater than yourself can you actually remove those desires. And he goes on next to say, a psychologist can point out all of these fearful thoughts and all of this bad mental behavior, bad cognitive thinking, all of these things. And he can even give you suggestions about it. But God is the only one that can remove the fear itself. Everything else is just compensating for it, right? And it'll just keep building and growing and growing and growing. But if you don't reach out to God, if you don't make that connection, eventually it never goes away. It always just sits there. You're always living a life based around fear, compensating for the fear, trying not to have the fear act up, not make it so you don't have to engage with it. You're walking around on eggshells so your fear doesn't materialize. You're in fear of your own fear. This is a horrible place to be. I used to be that person. I was both of these people. Horrifically self-indulgent and completely driven by fear. It's a miserable place to be. And the only way I've been able to actually walk through it is to find a God of my understanding. To connect with that power that gave me the ability to change, that removed those desires, that has helped me grow through that fear. And Kitchen talks about nothing we do. There will be nothing we as human beings can develop that can take that away. Nothing. We can refine and improve and test and quantify and do all of these things, but at the end of the day, we are but human. And the only thing that can actually take away those desires and those fears is that connection to a God of your understanding. Pretty powerful stuff there. I do want to say something else. When I was reading this, I said gowl. The word was Gaol. Now, I've looked it up since, and it's actually pronounced as jail. That was a common spelling for jail. Not too long ago, turns out. So I apologize for that and that mispronunciation of that word. Wanted to get that out of the way. So he was talking about being in... hold on. What did he actually reference it for? It is this power which converted man after man. In a certain jail. He was talking about going in and actually witnessing to people in jail. And he started talking about the impact that had. And not because of any psychological or medical or anything like that, but because he's had a spiritual experience. And these people at this jail were able to connect with a God of their understanding and have a spiritual experience for themselves too. And that's where everything started changing. And he just started talking about all the impact that this actually has on people and the impact it can have on communities. And it was actually, it's a great passage to actually go through. And then he goes to this... It's just amazing because it feels like this book was actually written, I don't know, last week sometimes, right? So I'm going to read this. It's on 213. And it's about what we seek as individuals. And it is this power of connecting to a God of your understanding, finally, and this power only, which can bring into being the social ideals of freedom, equality, and fraternity. Ideals that can never come to pass in any humanistic plan. That's exactly what we're talking about today. In every single country, in every single social class, right? Like everything is a conversation about freedom, equality, and fraternity, or connection, community. So same old problems, guys, same old problems. So he talks about equality here, right? And how the power of God is the great equalizer. With their inborn inequality of talents, for example, men can never gain equality in money and possessions. Completely true. All men, however, have equal opportunity to serve him. Him is capitalized. And the talent of the least is as necessary for this purpose as the talent of the greatest. Under God, all men are equal indeed. And when I read that, that's the truth. People are trying to seek equality from the world, trying to get the world to tell them you are equal. You are the same as me, right? We're looking in the wrong place, guys. Everyone's looking in the wrong place. And I know this is idealistic, but the reality is if everybody came to the God of their understanding and had a belief that that God was as good as the next, in the sense respecting another person's religion, right? And understand we are all just children under God. Suddenly the equality, I don't need equality back and forth. There's a mutual respect there. And that's where that sense of equality comes from. It's one child of God next to another child of God, whatever God that might be for them. That's amazing to me. We have all of this conversation and legislation about equality. It will never be enough. There will never be enough of it. There will always be some loophole, some caveat, some group that feels ostracized. And the equality comes from being of service to God, subservient to God. And then he talks about freedom, right? So equality comes from being of service to God. And then he says, here also all men are free. In a social system, I love this. Love this. Here also all men are free. In a social system, men invariably become the slaves of the systems they themselves devise. Isn't that the truth? Only God's higher freedom can detach them from these systems, liberate them from dependence upon other men, and free them from slavery to their own pleasures, indulgences, traditions, willfulness, and deceit. Whew. That's what we all want, isn't it? That feeling of oppression we've sometimes internalized, right? We've become slaves to a mindset. We've become slaves to a cell phone. We've become slaves to social media. We've become slaves to money, to prestige, to our fellow man, right? We need their approval. We need their validation. We need their applause, maybe even their prestige, those 5 Ps, right? We are a slave to our pleasures, our self-indulgences. True freedom comes from being of service to a God of your understanding. Because your selfishness and your self-centeredness and your fear takes a back seat, and suddenly your life changes. And there's just true freedom from those. How did he say it? Social systems and self-indulgence is that we ourselves have put ourselves in. We've enslaved ourselves to so many things for for a false sense of security and equality, guys. What have we been willing to give up for this? It blows my mind. And then the last thing here, as for fraternity, a brotherhood may be closely knit through some common concern or at times menace when some mutual interest is at stake. We talked about that, I think, last chapter, how like people only bond together when it serves them. But let that interest wane or the emergency pass, and men are again at each other's throats, right? We only work together as long as it serves us. Then any other time we're just trying to get over on each other. There are no true brothers except through a common father. And there is no brotherhood of man except under the fatherhood of God. Right? Brothers under God. Right? That shoulder to shoulder walking through this world, equal and free next to our brothers and sisters. That's only achievable by putting yourself in service to something that much greater than yourself. It's really a beautiful thing, right? We talk about freedom, and that freedom is a state of being. It's a mindset, right? It's an understanding. Brotherhood is to see someone as a human being standing next to you. Know that we're all here to be of service, equal parts. It's everything we're seeking today. These are not new problems, guys. So this last one here, last thing I want to say is this final quote. It's the last paragraph of this chapter. When, therefore, I am told that the Oxford group has no social outreach, I can answer from experience that unless a man has Christ, he has no reach at all. When I am told of those who would substitute a social gospel for the gospel of Jesus Christ, I can answer, you are slipping backwards, not forging ahead. And when I am told of extremists who would remake the world through revolution, I can answer, we want a revolution as much as you do, but you are only half-hearted. Yours is only a surface revolution. Ours goes all the way down, deep down, inside the man. Those are powerful words, especially in the context of today's political situations, the tensions that are going on today, right? Everyone wants to scrap the government's going on, the country's going on. They want to have these huge upheavals, but like I said earlier, it's swapping one evil for an unknown most of the time. Remember, the change has to come with us individually. It has to come from the bottom. We have to remake ourselves in the image of the God of your understanding and be of service to them. Then a lot of things can change. A lot of things can change. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, like, subscribe, follow. Check us out at any of those places before, especially here on YouTube or on Spotify, Facebook, anything you'd like. All right. We appreciate the support. Thank you all for joining me tonight. The next chapter is going to be called Chapter 15, This Business of Going to Church. That'll be an interesting one. Talking about religion. Here we go. Took us all the way to 15 to get there, though, so I'm looking forward to it. But thank you again for joining me tonight. And until next time, thanks.